Just unfortunately, I can't come to class today on Friday, the 17th of February. Um, so, what I would like you to do today to start off with is come to the Unite Commerce uh, homepage here, which you all have access to, and then I'd like you to come down to the Consumer Decisions tab there and click on that. 1.2 Consumer Decisions. Now, the other day in class, we pretty much worked our way through this types of goods and services worksheet here. I notice now that I can actually download that as a Google Doc. So if you haven't already done so, I think now would be a good time for you to download that document and have that in your consumer choice folder in your Google Drive. The next thing, and obviously during that we talked about some examples of goods, services, and if I scroll just down here to the questions, we also looked at the difference between durable goods and non-durable goods, and answered a few of these questions and looked at things like depreciation, etc., etc. So what I'd like you to do today is to come down here and have a look at the what influences consumers when buying goods and services Google presentation here. Again, it might not be the worst idea in the world to download that and put that into your folder. Now, it does say here that what we want you to do is to do a persuasive text or a persuasive argument about this, and the question there being, all that matters to consumers is price. Consumers will always buy the cheapest product. Do you agree or not? What I'd like you to do as you're going through this slideshow yourself is to maybe set up a in your Google sheet or your Google presentation, your Google slideshow, is maybe set up two columns there and have issues that come along as you're viewing this which agree with that statement, that price is the only thing that consumers are worried about. And then you might have things that come up that are against that, and just do it in point form. So rather than writing a persuasive text today, I think it would be a better idea for us just to list in point form what are the things in this presentation that agree with that statement, and what are the things that disagree with that statement, and then maybe you could at the end have a think about whether you agree with that statement or not. I think clearly, if you look at that, do you always buy the cheapest product that is available? I know I certainly don't. If I have the choice between buying a can of Schweppes or a can of Sprite or a can of home brand or no name type can of lemonade, I would probably more often than not go for one of the name brands rather than the generic brands. And I'm sure that many of you would agree with that statement as well. So, obviously price, and given that the generic brand might in many cases be cheaper, I think it's pretty obvious that we don't always do that, but some of you might agree with that, and that's fine. So I'll just click over to where I've opened up that slideshow and just have a quick look through there. I guess one factor that does affect whether you would buy a particular item or not is how much money you have, whether you are wealthy or able to afford different versions of the same product, or even whether you're able to afford to buy that product or not. So that might be something that affects it. The price of the product itself. If we go back to that example that I just talked about previously, where we talked about the soft drink, at what point do we sort of make the decision that, how expensive would a can of Schweppes or a can of Sprite have to be before you said, oh look, that's just ridiculously expensive, I'm just going to buy the cheaper option, the cheaper generic brand? So that might be something to think about there as well. And you might do your own example here. As you're doing this, you might think of products that you might buy regularly. And also, as you're going through these things, you might also have a think about where when you're going to set up your own business later in the year, how are you going to sort of make sure that people are more able to or more willing to buy your product than one of your competitors, who are the other people in the room and the other people in the other commerce class? How are you going to set yourself apart on price? And this very naturally leads into this bit here about marketing and advertising. You know, on many occasions, people are more likely, and you can see down the bottom here the Coke symbol, where, as I said before, Sprite is a Coke brand, and many people would be more willing to buy that brand than what they would for others, and the reason for that really is about marketing and advertising. And again, you might think that you're not affected by advertising at all. Well, if you buy more expensive brands of the same product, then I think you might find that you actually are. And also, you might also think about how your marketing campaign might be able to improve your chances of making money when you run a business later on. And also, I neglected to say previously, when you're talking about price, you can cut the price of your product as much as you like, but eventually you also need to make a profit out of it. And if your price is so cheap that you're not making any money off your product, then that's a recipe for disaster as far as you're running a business goes, or any business for that matter. Moving on, we could also talk about the age of the consumer, features of the consumer themselves. Are young people more inclined to buy some products than what older people are? And I think that's obviously the case, that the consumer purchases that you make would be different from the consumer purchases that I make, because we are just quite simply in a different phase of our life, and your parents and your grandparents then might be different again. So something to think about there as well, especially when you're marketing. Moving on next, we can talk about gender. Is there differences between what boys and what girls, or what males and females will buy, and the reasons behind that, and we might also consider that without making sure we treat our female friends and relatives with respect, not just using silly generalizations about the way females behave and the way males behave. But it is thinking about the reasoning behind why people buy particular products, why females buy different products from what males do. Convenience. I know I have a corner store. Luckily, have a corner store around the corner from my house, which sells things that I might need, like on a fairly quick basis. If I need milk or bread, I can go to the corner store and buy them. I know that in many places you actually don't have convenience or stores like that anymore, because they just find it difficult to compete with bigger stores. But the one thing is that I know that I'm going to pay much more for a 2 litre milk at the corner store than what I am going to spend at say Coles or Woolworths, a big supermarket or something like that. I'm probably going to pay double, or maybe even close to triple, at the local store. Moving on, I'm going to also talk about how good the thing is when it was purchased, and whether you're going to get some support afterwards. Particularly important for those longer term purchases, and you might have other factors as well here, like environmental concerns. Some products are produced in not particularly environmentally friendly ways. You might also think about products that are made by people in third world countries who get paid very poor wages. Is it right for you to sort of take advantage of that situation and buy those products, even though they are cheaper? They will be significantly cheaper than those products that are made in places where people get paid more wages. Do you have some sort of moral obligation to have a think about that when you are purchasing? And I know that many people do. Companies that damage the environment or aren't good with looking after their workers, etc., etc. Some people will boycott those companies and just not buy products from them. Moving back over to the consumer decisions page here now, after we've gone through there. So you might pause the video now and just go through that presentation again and making that list of things that agree with this statement here or disagree with that statement. And then when you pick it back up, what I'd like you to do is again come down to the bottom of this Google Doc, and as I said, that is now open and able to be downloaded. Again, you'd be saving that in your Google Drive Consumer Choice folder. And then what I'd like you to do is have a go at answering the questions in this sheet here. So it says, in the space provided, insert an example or an explanation of each factor that affects consumer decisions. So we've basically talked about all those things. They're the same things from the presentation there, pretty much. You might also like to add an other down the bottom there that, you know, as I said before, my life situation is very different from what yours is. You might have other reasons why you buy particular products. There's no reason why you couldn't add another column at the end there and express your own reasons for why you make decisions as well. Moving on, there's another presentation here and about buying a pair of thongs. An interesting sort of case study about why you might buy a particular product or not buy a particular product. Once you open that up, as I'm doing now, you can see that it takes you through some decisions about why you would buy this particular product or why you wouldn't buy this particular product. I'm just letting that come up, and you might also, as you're going through, you can also have a look at moving down through into this document here, which you can also download off the Google site there, which talks about consumer decisions. And there's some work there for you to do out of the textbook as well. And moving on down, I think they're just the same. That's the same thing, just repeated twice. So again, just download that into your Google Drive folder for consumer choice. You might like to put a date on there as the date that you downloaded it. And that should pretty much take us through. If there is any opportunity for people to have any extra time, you also might like to move on down and have a look at the next bit there, which is about choosing where to buy certain products. So I'd be expecting at a minimum though that each of you would get down to this section here and complete that for homework if you have not already done so by the end of this lesson. And then I will catch up with you guys next week. If there are any questions, you can pop me an email, no problem at all, and I will endeavour to get back to you today. I am actually at school, but I'm just in a meeting this morning, so if you pop me an email, I'll be able to